One Piece. The worst pirates in history, starting from Rock's Pirates. Chapter 81. Impossible. This time, it was Sengoku who loudly retorted. You're a pirate. How could your heart be inclined towards the light? What a joke. York smiled without a word. The facts had already proven that any more verbal arguments would simply be a waste of time. So, he decisively unleashed his magnificent conqueror's haki. The black and red haki transformed into a pillar of light, enveloping his entire being and piercing through the sky. The dark clouds in the sky began to rotate, using this pillar of light as their center. After waiting for so long, I'm sure you're all very curious about what my trump card is. Don't worry, I'll show it to you now. The haki pillar of light slowly contracted, and York's gentle voice rang out. He spread his arms to the sides, closed his eyes, and assumed a completely defenseless transformation pose. Seeing this, Garp immediately punched York in the face with a fist bone impact, sending him flying through countless buildings. It's come to this point, do you think we'd still patiently wait for you to gather your strength? Ha ha. York, who had been sent flying into the distance, slowly got up, raising a hand to wipe away the blood from the corner of his mouth. He wasn't angry because of it, only letting out a soft chuckle. It's useless. An awakened power won't be stopped by your interruptions. As he finished speaking, dark flames materialized out of thin air, originating from both sides of his waist, wrapping forward and upward over his shoulders, then backward around York's neck, forming a ribbon of flame that floated silently behind his head. At the same time, York's neatly trimmed black hair also seemed to ignite, transforming into pure white flames that burned and ascended erratically. This appearance, this posture, was unmistakably the awakened form of a zone-type ability user. Seeing this scene, Garp, Sengoku, and Suru, who had already somewhat anticipated York's trump card, weren't very surprised. Only Sengoku noticed the anomaly. This awakened form of yours. Aren't you a Paramesha-type ability user? That's right. Of course, I'm a Paramesha. York smiled mysteriously. But my devil fruit is a bit special. Before the fruit awakened, York's fruit was 100% a Paramesha type, truly and unequivocally. But after awakening, that might no longer be the case. Don't forget, his devil fruit was obtained by twisting reality through willpower, not a conventional devil fruit that had been circulating for many years with its abilities already mostly solidified. Because of this, from a certain perspective, his fruit could be considered a kind of unique newborn. And what a newborn will become after reaching adulthood, besides its innate endowments, is, of course, also influenced by its upbringing. The essence of York's devil fruit ability was happiness, or rather, desire. However, the manifestation of the ability was light and light tentacles. And then the effect of the ability generally led to corruption and destruction. This was actually related to the changes in York's state when he first wished for the ability. Before his parents were killed, he harbored a somewhat lewd mindset, wanting to obtain a devil fruit that would allow him to do whatever he wanted with beautiful women. But when his parents were killed, extreme anger filled his mind with only thoughts of destruction. These contradictory desires, one before and one after, twisted together to give birth to such a happy fruit. All of the above was accurate information York obtained only after conversing with the fruit devil he created in the awakening space. In addition, the fruit devil also told him that because it was a newborn, it still had a high degree of plasticity, and until York himself died, the fruit's ability would be influenced by him and the stories and legends he created. In other words, York could DIY and modify his abilities within a certain range. As long as the ability could be self-consistent at the interpretive level, the modification would generally be successful. And this was also the main reason why York did not immediately leave Sky Island after his fruit awakened. From the time his fruit awakened until Mads called him, York had been DIYing his abilities and fabricating stories. Finally, which is now, after York's abilities were fundamentally modified and the origin of the abilities was basically fabricated, his fruit ability is explained as follows. The sacred origin at the dawn of creation. Legend has it that in ancient times, the universe gave birth to the sole sun god, Ra. He forged the sun disk with pure light and nurtured life with gentle warmth, revered as the father of all things. At that time, his divinity was like unblemished gold leaf, gently spreading hope to all life with light. Under his protection, humans lived in peace and prosperity, maintaining the world's balance with devout offerings. Divine splintering by the erosion of desire. One day, the sun god Ra suddenly wanted to observe his creations up close, but his true form was too scorching. Once he approached, all things would wither. Thus, he split off a part of his body, transforming into a human and beginning to walk among mortals. This experience allowed him to see the beauty of his creations from another perspective, but at the same time, he also became tainted by human desires in the process. When the avatar returned to the main body, Ra's divinity began to be twisted and influenced by human desires. And this distortion and influence grew stronger day by day due to human faith and offerings. Ultimately, to avoid destroying everything he had created, Ra voluntarily tore himself apart. Thus, Apophis, the dark sun god who governed desire and corruption, was born. From the perspective of the sun god Ra, from the moment Apophis was born, they were already two independent entities. However, from the human perspective, the luminous sun god Ra and the dark sun god Apophis were both the same sun god, merely different manifestations under different emotions. Therefore, when this legend was transformed into a devil fruit, Ra and Apophis would coexist within the same devil fruit. The above is York's creation of the origin story for his fruit ability. And after this ability's origin was fabricated by him, his fruit ability also underwent corresponding changes. From the initial conventional Paramesha-type happy fruit, it transformed into a zone-type human fruit, mythical zone, sun god form. The new sun god fruit ability, influenced by York's fabricated story, was further divided into two separate abilities. Dark sun god, zone-type human fruit, mythical zone, Apophis form. This form primarily inherited the previous happy fruit's abilities, focusing on corruption and desire. Light sun god, zone-type human fruit, mythical zone, Ra form. This form is an entirely new ability. Its specific manifestations will be primarily based on York's perception of the sun and the sun god. Putting away the memories of Di Ying, his fruit ability. With the black flame ribbon floating behind his head and his hair transformed into brilliant white flames, York looked at Garp, Sengoku, and Suru with a half-smile, and softly asked, "Now, do you know what the essence of the sun is?" The essence of the sun. Sengoku and Suru frowned slightly, vaguely sensing something amiss. Why bother with him? Garp suddenly bellowed, releasing a conqueror's haki almost as powerful as York's. Clenching his right fist, his signature, fist of love, was about to strike York again. Watching Garp charge at him, the smile on York's face grew even brighter. Garp's speed was actually very fast, if not supersonic, then close to the speed of sound. But in York's eyes, in his Ra, god of the sun form, it was not much different from a snail. With a flash, York appeared directly 100 meters in the air. Boom! Garp's punch missed, and a large section of Water 7's buildings were pulverized by the shockwave. York, who had not yet mastered observation haki, was immediately recaptured by Garp and Sengoku, with Suru a step slower. York looked down at the three from above, and also at the other Marines who had not left. The essence of the sun, I'm sure you wouldn't know the answer, so I'll just tell you directly. After a slight pause, York slowly raised his arms to his sides, adopting a posture as if embracing the sky. The essence of the sun is nuclear fusion. As soon as his voice fell, an extreme light and heat were instantly released from York's body. The pure white light transformed into a rapidly expanding sphere of light. The terrifying high temperature and heatwave, even without direct contact, already caused the clothes of the Marines present to spontaneously combust. Then, immediately after, many Marines with insufficient strength began to lose a large amount of water from their bodies, almost instantly being scorched into charred corpses, ashes, and then annihilated. Next, the ground itself began to melt like lava, and even crystallize. In the nick of time, before the giant light sphere had fully expanded, Sengoku instantly transformed into a giant Buddha. He didn't bother with showing off by emitting golden light, and immediately shielded Garp and Suru beneath him. Garp and Suru were also protecting themselves, using armament haki to cover their entire bodies with all their might, while Garp punched the ground, cracking it. It was already night at this time. But a bright sun was rising over the sea. The entire Water 7 was covered by the sun, the whole of Alabasta could see the sun rising from afar, and the view from Sky Island was even clearer. A huge ball of light suddenly exploded over the vast sea. Gloriosa, Stussy, Shaki, Kuma, Ivankov, Ginny, the red flag pirates looked at the sun rising from the sea, all rendered speechless. Over the vast sea, Dragon was originally flying at full speed towards Sky Island when he suddenly felt the sky brighten, and with a premonition, he turned to look back. He clearly saw a pure white sun rising over the sea. Not far from Sky Island, Kaido, holding up his newly built pirate crew, was also filled with shock. Is this York's Devil Fruit awakening? Holy Land Mary Geoise. The sudden daylight startled all the celestial dragons in the Holy Land. Garen immediately rushed to the edge of the city, looking towards where the light was rising. A pure white sun was rising over the sea there. In the room of authority, the Gorosei stood in a line by the window, looking in the direction of the rising sun, their eyes filled with disbelief and shock. That direction. It seems to be Water 7. Sengoku and Garp just received news to go to Water 7 to capture York. Which means, in the Room of Flowers. This place was completely sealed, and no light from outside could penetrate, but Amu still instinctively raised its head and turned to look in the direction of Water 7. Water 7. Extreme light accompanied by an extreme roar sounded simultaneously. In an instant, truly just an instant, the entire Water 7 was annihilated and disappeared under the expansion of the giant sun. When the light dispersed, only a huge deep pit remained where Water 7 once stood. The surrounding seawater, only at this moment, finally lost its obstruction and rushed in with a thunderous roar. Rumble. A giant whirlpool formed at the former site of Water 7. York floated silently in midair, watching the surging waves below, breathing heavily, his pure white, flame-like hair subtly showing signs of returning to black. Hey! I'll spare your lives for now. York, dragging his nearly exhausted body, shot a pure white beam of light in the direction Kaido had previously departed. The white light formed a node in the distant sky, similar to the 8-foot mirror later developed by Kizaru. York used light speed to instantly move to this node, and then repeated the process. Teleporting again and again, he finally appeared before Kaido. Yo, Kaido, I'll leave the rest to you. After saying his last words, York completely returned to his normal state, and his whole body fell downwards like a kite with a broken string. Kaido hesitated for a moment, as he didn't want to be mistaken for York's mount. But looking at York's falling figure, he still twisted his dragon body and actively moved his head beneath York to catch him. He landed on Kaido's head, which was hard. But fortunately, York was only exhausted and had not lost consciousness. Realizing his current position, he couldn't help but tease, I thought you'd let me sink into the sea. HMPH. Kaido snorted unhappily. Don't compare me to trash like Wang Ji. Ha 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 ha. York burst into laughter, then closed his eyes peacefully, falling into sleep and rest. When Kaido returned to Sky Island with York, everyone immediately gathered around. How is York? Is the captain alright? Was that attack the captain's ability? It was too amazing. That giant white ball of light, it was just like the sun. Captain. Captain York. The concerned calls and excited words instantly became a chattering chorus. But seeing that York showed no reaction at all, everyone started to get a little anxious. Until York impatiently opened one eye. Quiet, let me get some good sleep, that move drained all my stamina. With that, he closed his eyes again, sleeping peacefully. Seeing this, everyone first froze, then completely relaxed. Gloriosa quietly walked to York's side, straightened her legs, and sat on the island cloud, then moved York's head onto her lap, making him more comfortable. York noticed the softness behind his head, adjusted his posture slightly to rest his neck more comfortably, and smelling the faint fragrance emanating from Gloriosa, he fell completely asleep. Stussy and Shaki, seeing this scene, were secretly annoyed that Gloriosa had gotten there first, but they both knelt down beside York, one on each side, quietly guarding the sleeping York. The former site of Water 7. The seawater was still surging, but suddenly, several black-red hockey lightning flashes streaked across, causing a large volume of seawater to abruptly rise high before exploding. Garp, along with his subordinate Bogey, took advantage of the momentary gap created by his punch. One carried Sengoku, and the other carried Suru. They quickly used Moonwalk and Soru to successfully escape from underwater. Thanks to the air burst used by York, although the surface part of Water 7 was flattened, the underwater section was not deeply damaged. It was even more akin to using an extremely strong shockwave to compact the part of Water 7 that was originally on the surface downwards. Therefore, the underwater crater York blasted out was actually only about 10 meters from the sea level. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy for Garp and his companions to escape from there. Garp carried Sengoku, his feet performing moonwalk, and looked down at the surging sea below, his expression complex. This time, to capture York, they had dispatched 10,000 marine elites. As a result, York's single sun explosion annihilated almost all of them. Currently, he only knew that the 4 of them had survived. It was truly too tragic. Garp let out a long sigh. Together with Bogi, carrying the heavily injured Sengoku and the unconscious Suru, he quickly used moonwalk to rush towards the nearest support fleet. The Battle of Water 7 shook the world. That bright sea sun was clearly visible even from Alabasta, not to mention other islands closer to Water 7. Not only the Grand Line, but even the East Blue and South Blue, separated by only a calm belt, also saw the pure white blazing sun rise from the sea. The news simply couldn't be concealed. However, the world government was ultimately still the ruler of this world. Under their invincible money power, all media outlets worldwide distorted the event into a meteor shower, stating that Water 7 was destroyed as a result, and fortunately, the Marine fleet was nearby at the time, rescuing a large number of innocent civilians from Water 7, and so on. Of course, this was only the news that most ordinary people learned through newspapers. Those hegemonic forces on the sea with their own independent intelligence networks had more or less found out the truth about Water 7. The Marine dispatched a large force to encircle and annihilate York's group, remnants of the Rock's pirates, and the pure white sun that illuminated the night sky was the product of this battle. Upon learning this news, all the hegemonic forces were itching with curiosity and dispatched more intelligence units, attempting to learn more detailed specifics of the battle. However, under the full cover-up by the world government and the Marine, they simply couldn't ascertain the exact losses of both sides in this battle. Even when Garp appeared unharmed in the New World Sea area, all forces couldn't help but speculate whether York's group had already been eliminated. After all, Garp was the Marines' top combat force, and he had clearly appeared in Water 7. Since Garp was unharmed and York was nowhere to be found, it was naturally assumed that Garp had achieved victory and York's group was annihilated. Tisk tisk tisk, Garp is truly a monster. Could that sun have been created by him? To defeat the Rock's pirate crew by himself, the title of Marine hero truly holds weight. Everyone almost already believed this. However, a few days later, the situation suddenly reversed. York's bounty, which was previously 3 billion berries, suddenly soared to 4.5 billion berries, an increase of a full 1.5 billion berries, practically half of his own previous bounty. At the same time, apart from York, the bounties of the other members of the Red Flag Pirates remained almost unchanged, with only 2 additional figures, the big-headed Ivankov, and former Marine recruit, Monkey D. Dragon. Red Flag Pirate Crew Apprentice, Emporio Ivankov, bounty, 5 million berries. Red Flag Pirate Crew Apprentice, Monkey D. Dragon, bounty, 50 million berries. This sudden and abnormal change instantly attracted the attention of various major powers. York isn't dead. And he most likely hasn't been captured. Otherwise, his bounty wouldn't have increased so much all at once. This means that the sun that illuminated the night sky that evening was actually created by York. Speaking of which, York's ability seems to be emitting light. The rising and falling speculations once again ignited the world. Whitebeard looked at York's new wanted poster, a trace of reminiscence appearing on his face. His bounty surpassed mine so quickly, he truly is a monstrous kid. No wonder York and Rox had always had a good relationship back when the Rox pirate crew hadn't disbanded. This kid, without Rox suppression, has completely bloomed with his own light. However, despite his emotion, Whitebeard looked up at a pineapple-headed boy not far from him, and a smile reappeared on his face. Gurararara, I don't need to compare myself to York, my goal is simply to have a family. Not far away. Marco, only 8 years old, noticed Whitebeard's gaze and immediately scurried over. Pops, what happened? Whitebeard casually handed him the wanted poster. An old friend of mine, He's become even more formidable than me now. Marco looked at the numbers on the wanted poster and, after counting them, couldn't help but exclaim. 4.5 billion. His bounty is even higher than yours, Pops. And he looks so young. How is he so powerful? Gurararara. Whitebeard laughed and patted Marco's small head. You don't need to compare yourself to him, that guy is a monster. Just focus on training your 8-headed serpent devil fruit. Marco nodded lightly. Being precocious, he didn't have any thoughts of competition. However, he still felt a little unconvinced inside. Because in his perception, Pops Whitebeard was the strongest person in this world. This person named York, whose bounty was even higher than Pop's, did he intentionally do something particularly evil? Sky Island. York actually wasn't seriously injured. Just as he said upon his return, he was merely exhausted from using his awakened ultimate move. After a good night's sleep, he had fully recovered. The reason he hadn't appeared in the outside world was purely because some matters on Sky Island needed to be handled. After finishing those, his new bounty had just about been released. After quickly purchasing newspapers and the new wanted poster from the outside world via Stussie's mirror world, the members of the Red Flag pirate crew all excitedly jumped up. Haha. 4.5 billion berries. Surpassed Whitebeard, Golden Lion, and Roger. Captain York is now the world's strongest expert. York raised his hands, temporarily calming the excitement of the crowd. I don't care if I'm the strongest in the world. But at least after the Battle of Water 7, the world government should not easily move against us again. So, I've decided to officially set sail from Sky Island. We're heading to the Blue Sea to begin our pirate cruise expansion journey. Upon hearing this, the members of the Red Flag pirate crew first froze, then erupted in even louder, more enthusiastic cheers. That's great. Setting sail. Expansion. Let's recruit people. Before setting off, naturally, there was a lot of preparation work to be done. For instance, moving the necessary provisions for a long voyage onto the new pirate ship, and arranging for people to stay behind at their Sky Island home. Although York could return to Sky Island at any moment thanks to Stussie's mirror world, he couldn't always be ready to do so, so people were still needed to guard the home. After some discussion, Gloriosa voluntarily chose to stay on Sky Island. The reason was simple. She didn't feel comfortable entrusting their Sky Island home, the first territory York had ever conquered, to anyone else. And she, not only York's first woman but also a former pirate empress, possessed extensive experience in kingdom management. When York was away from Sky Island previously, she was generally the one handling daily affairs. Gloriosa's proactive sacrifice touched York's heart. He was, after all, a normal man. Even if he liked beautiful women and planned to bring more into his harem in the future, he was not a robot stud, and he naturally developed different degrees of affection for different people. Therefore, at that moment, York almost couldn't resist getting Gloriosa pregnant with his first child. However, after much deliberation, he temporarily put that idea aside. The reason was equally simple. Rox's past mistakes were a clear warning. If it weren't for his wife and children facing mortal danger, forcing him to wage the God Valley War, York would probably still be a member of the Rox Pirates. Unable to make Gloriosa a mother right away, York could only spend a few more nights with her, enjoying their time as a couple. In a blink of an eye, several more days passed, and finally, it was time to depart. York gently kissed Gloriosa's forehead and waved goodbye to little Teach. Teach was still too young, only 3 years old, so York hadn't planned to bring him along. Plus, with 2-year-old Eneru also there, they could play together as companions and wouldn't be lonely. In contrast, York brought both 10-year-old Kuma and 14-year-old Ginny onto the ship. Including them, the Red Flag Pirates members sailing out were York, Shaki, Stussie, Kaido, Dragon, and Ivankov, totaling 8 people. 8 people controlling a super-giant ship with a total length of 360 meters would, of course, be impossible using conventional methods. But fortunately, York and his crew were almost all devil fruit users. Kaido's flame clouds could lift the ship, Dragon's ability could provide propulsion, and what York and his crew truly needed to manage was merely the raising and lowering of sails and the steering of the rudder. Of course, even so, 8 people still seemed a bit stretched. Therefore, The first stop for York and his crew after departing from Sky Island was Jaya Island, located directly beneath them. And to avoid exposing the existence of Sky Island, York also had Kaido and Dragon maneuver the ship to make an extra loop before landing on the sea, then sail normally to Jaya Island in the Blue Sea. The enormous dragon-headed ship approached the small island, its mountain-like size making it difficult to tell whether the ship was larger or the island was larger. A large number of pirates, unable to proceed to the next island because their log post pointed to Sky Island, gathered at the port to watch the massive warship. What a huge ship! Which pirate crew is this? The symbol on the pirate flag, it's not very familiar. Why are both the flag and the mainsail pure red? The pirates' confusion was quickly dispelled. This was because York appeared at the very top of the ship's dragon head. He radiated holy light, looking down upon the pirates on Jaya Island from above. Holding a small transponder snail in his palm, York announced, "I am Adolf D. York. I am currently recruiting crew members. Anyone who wants to board my ship can come over now." At these words, the pirates on the island immediately erupted in thunderous cheers. It's York. The legendary fallen master. It's really him. The pirate with the highest bounty in the world. After confirming that the York standing at the bow was indeed him through his wanted poster, the pirates immediately burst into a second round of cheers. I want to board the ship. I want to board the ship too. Please take us in. The pirates on Jaya Island scrambled over each other. They even set sail on their own pirate ships without waiting for York's ship to dock, sailing alongside York's ship and loudly requesting York and his crew to throw down rope ladders so they could board the large ship. York accepted everyone without hesitation. His goal now was to expand the pirate crew first, quality could wait. Thus, a boarding event lasted directly from morning until afternoon. Finally, when it seemed no one else wanted to board, York pulled out the transponder snail again and shouted. Are there no more pirates who wish to join my ranks? There were still some scattered pirates on Jaya Island. These pirates either thought too highly of themselves and didn't want to be subservient, or they were entangled with other powerful pirate crews, serving as their subordinates. Therefore, they made no move in response to York's second recruitment call. Observation hockey swept across the entire island. Jaya Island in the Blue Sea was not large, and York could easily cover it. After confirming that no one else on the entire island wanted to join his ranks, York's lips curled into a ferocious grin. He raised his hand and pointed towards Jaya Island, giving his first captain's order to the newly joined crew members. Plunder Jaya Island clean. Kill all the pirates on the island who refuse to join my ranks. As this order was given, the eyes of the pirates who had just joined the Red Flag Pirates today instantly gleamed with fierce light. Meanwhile, the faces of the pirates on the island who had refused to join changed dramatically. Fallen Master. You can't do this. We are a subordinate pirate crew of the XXX pirate crew. Do you want to make an enemy of the XXX pirate crew? Boom. Pushed by the strong winds created by Dragon, the Red Flag pirate ship directly crushed the pirate ships still docked at the pier, and its massive hull crashed onto the land. Kill. York's response was just one word, and a large number of newly joined crew members leapt from the ship like a waterfall. A brutal battle between pirates immediately swept across the entire Jaya Island. Several hours later, in the evening, all pirates on Jaya Island who were unwilling to join York's ranks were annihilated, and all resources and wealth on the entire island were plundered and piled together. This included the resources that those who had joined York's ranks had kept from their own pirate crews, all were donated. Looking at the huge pile of treasures and supplies before him, he and his cadres took no money from the treasures, distributing it all equally among all new members. At the same time, all the supplies plundered from Jaya Island were used to host a feast. Eat as much as you can, drink as much as you can. Whatever wasn't eaten or drunk was then loaded onto the pirate ship. Awoo! A lively feast was held on Jaya Island, as the Red Flag Pirates officially declared to the world that, starting from Jaya Island, they would embark on a new legend of the sea. After the grand banquet, York set sail with all the pirates from Jaya Island. The massive pirate ship, propelled by strong winds, quickly vanished into the distant horizon. Not long after York and his crew departed, a full-length mirror, intentionally left behind in the Jaya Island tavern, suddenly rippled like water. Sky Islanders and Shandians, wearing identical uniforms but with wings on their backs, emerged one after another from the mirror, led by Gloriosa. From today onwards, this island is our new territory. Back to York. After a simple yet thorough count, there were a total of 1518 newly joined pirates on board from Jaya Island. There should have been close to 1600, but the remaining dozens unfortunately died in yesterday's infighting. Among these 1518 people, there were also many with light and severe injuries. Captain York, where are we heading next? Rue asked, and York glanced at the injured on the ship, then pulled out an eternal pose. First, let's go to Drum Kingdom, recruit some doctors there, and treat all the injured on board. Drum Kingdom is the island where Luffy and Chopper met in the original story. In York's current timeline, Chopper had not yet been born, and neither had Wapol. However, precisely because of this, Drum Kingdom remains one of the world-renowned medical holy lands. As a winter island, its ability to become a world government-affiliated nation was due to its medical expertise continuously attracting wealth from outside, allowing it to pay the heavenly tribute. York did not intend to destroy Drum Kingdom on this trip, he was merely going to recruit doctors. And the reason for not destroying it was simple, for the Munch Munch Devil Fruit. York didn't care about changing the plot or anything, what he cared about was the Munch Munch Devil Fruit. Not to mention the possibility of the Munch Munch Devil Fruit allowing someone to eat a second devil fruit, just the fact that it can create the strongest alloy in the original story, Wapol Metal, was enough. This made it worth York's patience to wait for Wapol's birth and give him a chance to encounter the Munch Munch Devil Fruit. After about 10 days of sailing, York and his crew successfully arrived at the bitterly cold, snow-covered Drum Kingdom. As their fortress-like pirate ship approached the harbor, the originally calm and peaceful city immediately erupted into chaos. Pirates! The pirates are here! Run for your lives! Quickly notify the marine. The panicked citizens stirred the bloodthirsty desires of York's new recruits. As genuine old pirates, they were completely different creatures from Luffy's crew. Murder, arson, rape, and plunder were all commonplace for them. Especially these weak citizens who now only panicked and fled at the sight of them were their favorite targets for slaughter and looting. No one messes around on my watch. However, before they could act, York spoke first using a Den Den Mushi megaphone. I came to this island to recruit doctors. Have you all forgotten the deaths of those severely injured crewmates during these days of sailing? If you want someone to help treat you after battles in the future, then all of you hold it in. There will be plenty of time for you to kill and burn. With that, York instructed Rue to select some pirates with kinder faces and relatively gentler personalities to accompany them ashore. He casually grabbed a few panicking citizens, asking them for the location of the royal palace. Learning that the royal palace was located on Drum Mountain, 5,000 meters high, the group headed straight for it. Along the way, they encountered the unique creatures of Drum Kingdom, the Lapons. These were highly aggressive, giant, carnivorous rabbits, reaching up to 3 meters tall, and lived in groups. These rabbits had caused considerable trouble for Luffy's crew in the original story and later became the guards of the Sakura Kingdom. However, unfortunately, these rabbits were now encountering York and a large group of old pirates who had been active in the first half of the Grand Line for many years. York didn't even need to act. The old pirates swarmed forward, fighting the rabbits and quickly killing most of the giant rabbits that attempted to trigger an avalanche. Haha. We have ingredients for the next voyage. Ivankov, Kuma, and Ginny also participated in this battle, and their combat performance was quite good, as besides Ivankov, the other two were devil fruit users. And Ivankov himself was actually very talented. At this stage, he could subdue a giant Lapon alone just with his martial arts. After dealing with these rabbits, York and his crew had no further obstacles on their way to the kingdom. Even climbing the mountain was done directly using Kaido's flame clouds, successfully intercepting the king and his retinue before they could escape. Why are you running? The current king of Drum Kingdom, likely Wapol's grandfather, along with a group of national ministers and palace attendants, was surrounded by York and the old pirates. Pirates, what do you want to do? Wapol's grandfather was a bit outwardly fierce but inwardly timid. Despite being terrified, he still had to bravely step forward. Nothing much. I plan to recruit some doctors in your country. I don't want to search house by house, so I'm going to have you issue an order to gather all the doctors in the country, allowing me to recruit them. Just that simple. Of course. If you're unwilling to cooperate, I don't mind making things a bit more troublesome. Wapple's grandfather swallowed hard, not daring to stubbornly refuse, and very obediently wrote down the order York requested. Under York's deliberate allowance, a large group of guards used the local unique cableways to leave the mountaintop where the palace was located, heading to various towns across the island to deliver messages and orders. York didn't care if these messengers would notify the Marine. He had just annihilated 10,000 Marine soldiers a while ago. As long as they knew it was him who had arrived, he believed the nearby branches would be very sensible and only arrive on time, after he had finished his business. In a flash, several hours passed, and the sky grew dark, but not a single doctor had arrived. York waved his hand. Let's go. Into the palace. We'll stay here until the doctors arrive. Awoo. The pirates cheered. Living in a proper royal palace was something they had always dreamed of but never dared to do. Wapple's grandfather wanted to loudly reprimand these rude pirates, but seeing the gleaming swords in their hands, he didn't even dare to let out a peep. After entering the palace, the newly joined pirates immediately acted like huskies unleashed from their leashes, ransacking and destroying everything. Among them, only a small number of pirates remembered the rules York had laid down when they landed, staying behind York without much movement. Most of the other pirates, seeing that York didn't speak to stop them, gradually grew bolder. One of them even brought one of Wapple's female elders, who was still a young woman at the time, before York. Captain York, this is the most beautiful princess here, please enjoy her. York smiled faintly. With Shaki in his left arm and Stussy in his right, he looked at the pirate who had brought the beauty. Do you think I need such a common beauty? The pirate was stunned, glanced at the two peerless beauties beside York, and then at the so-called most beautiful princess he had forcefully snatched from several of his colleagues. It seems. I really don't need her. He, I'm sorry, Captain York, I was ignorant. No, your heart is still good. York carefully observed the pirate. He was about 30 years old, well built, with a certain shrewdness in his eyes, and not ugly in appearance. Considering he was the first pirate to dare to curry favor with him, York asked, "What's your name?" Reporting, Captain York, my name is Scott. Good, Scott, that's a good name. York paused briefly, then laughed heartily. From now on, you are the first squad leader of our pirate crew. Your status is only below the core cadres. Upon hearing this, Scott was overjoyed. Thank you, Captain York. York continued, also, this princess you just snatched is yours. Remember, she is the wife I bestow upon you. Treat her well. Scott was stunned again, turned to look at the beautiful young woman trembling in his hands, and his quick mind grasped the deeper meaning in York's words. Immediately, he knelt on both knees before York. Thank you, Captain York. My life, Scott's life, is yours forever, Captain York. Ha 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 ha. York burst into a loud laugh, waving his hand. Go. Enjoy your new wife. Scott respectfully assented, stretched out his hands, and directly picked up his new wife by the waist, presumably heading to one of the palace rooms to spend their wedding night. The surrounding pirates watched him pass, their eyes filled not only with envy but also with jealousy and resentment. How did he get ahead of us? That cunning fool. What a lucky fellow. Rue stood beside York, silently taking everything in. His brows furrowed slightly, as if his compassionate nature was about to act up again. York, however, didn't give him the chance, speaking first before Rue could. Rue, go and note down those who obeyed my captain's orders when we landed. In the future, these people will be our true crew members. As for the others, except for Scott just now, I will find opportunities for them to die one by one in battle. Upon hearing this, Rue's pupils contracted slightly, then he nodded gently. He knew that York would not truly indulge his pirates so much. As for the tragedy happening in this palace right now, York had once told him this: the premise of not harming one's family is not benefiting one's family. These old nobles had enslaved others for generations, enjoying the wealth created by the poor. Perhaps there were indeed some innocent individuals among their descendants who had not committed any evil deeds. But as long as these innocents did not actively contribute to the poor, they were still beneficiaries of their ancestors' wrongdoings. Therefore, there was no need for a moral burden when settling accounts with such people. The night passed without incident. The chaos in the palace did not affect York and the others who had returned to the mirror world to rest. Early the next morning, doctors began to appear in succession in the square in front of the palace gates. To prevent them from freezing, York had them all brought into the palace's reception hall. Seeing the messy state of the palace, and the many disheveled pirates still causing trouble in various parts of the palace, these doctors couldn't help but frown. But with the king's command and the pirates' swords having already arrived, it was clear they would no longer have a chance to leave. Days passed, one after another. The Marines from the nearby branch had already arrived in the offshore waters of Drum Kingdom. However, seeing the pirate crew flag on the giant pirate ship, the Rear Admiral sent for support had no intention of landing on the island. Rear Admiral, are we really just going to ignore this? Some Marine soldiers expressed their unwillingness, asking how they could just stand by and watch pirates plunder. The Marine Rear Admiral said nothing, only silently slapping York's wanted poster onto the Marine's face. If you believe we can apprehend a pirate of this caliber, I will immediately order the entire ship to dock and land on the island. After seeing the numbers on the wanted poster, the unwilling Marine soldier silently closed his mouth. Other soldiers who already knew about it breathed a sigh of relief. A top-tier pirate with a bounty as high as 4.5 billion berries, anyone with a clear head knew that this was simply not something they could handle. It was better to notify Marineford and have them send an admiral for support. Marineford. Marine Headquarters. After a period of treatment, Sengoku's consciousness had awakened, but the burns on his back were so severe that he could only lie on his stomach, wrapped in bandages, day in and day out, unable even to lie on his side. The intelligence regarding the Red Flag pirates' appearance in Drum Kingdom had been sent over early, and his aide had attended the meeting and was now reporting to him. Vice Admiral Suru's opinion is to observe and not act rashly for now. The combat power of the Red Flag pirates is not something a single admiral can defeat. Fleet Admiral Kong approved Vice Admiral Suru's suggestion at the meeting. In the manga, Kong was an admiral during God Valley. Here, the setting is that Kong was promoted from admiral to fleet admiral after God Valley. After listening to his aide's report, Sengoku, lying on the sickbed, let out a soft sigh. Regrets, if only I had back then. He remembered the time he had turned a blind eye and let York go. If he had fully executed the higher-ups' orders back then, completely blockading the island and not letting a single person escape, how could the York of today exist? However, no amount of such regretful words would be useful, so after his lament, Sengoku could only sigh softly again. Suru's suggestion is correct. We cannot confront the Red Flag pirates head-on now. York's ability is too terrifying. Numbers are just a figure in front of him. To subdue the current York, we must find another way. As he spoke, a glint flashed in Sengoku's eyes. Although he hadn't actually participated in the God Valley War, he knew exactly what had happened on God Valley Island. Rox, the great pirate who had always left Fleet Admiral Kong helpless, reportedly fought to the death to protect his wife and child, who had stumbled upon the island. York, it could now be traced that he already had 3 women with whom he had intimate relationships. In the future, given his philandering nature, the number of women around him would only increase. And in the foreseeable future, his children would eventually be born from these women. Sengoku disdained using such underhanded tactics, but the battle at Water 7 made him realize just how severe the consequences of not completely eradicating a threat could be. Therefore, for the justice that reigns supreme to truly be realized, no enemy can be given any more chances. Back to York. After several days of waiting. Except for a few stubborn individuals and rebellious ones who showed no respect for the king of Drum Kingdom, almost all the doctors in Drum Kingdom had gathered at the palace. York sat on the throne that originally belonged to Wapple's grandfather, looking down from above at the large group of doctors in the hall. A rough scan showed a total of several hundred people, and after careful calculation, the exact number was 411. My name is Adolph D. York, and I am the captain of the Red Flag Pirates. I won't elaborate too much on my specific deeds. I believe all the doctors present, if they've looked into it, are very clear. I've come to Drum Kingdom this time to do only one thing. Recruit some ship doctors from among you. After a slight pause, York observed the reactions of the doctors below. Most reactions were flat, and many showed fear, clearly worried they would be killed if they didn't comply. Don't worry, I am not a cruel person. York continued, recruiting you is a formal employment. I will pay you salaries and will not force you to join the ship. Pausing again, York stated solemnly, any doctor willing to join the ship will receive a minimum monthly salary of 1 million berries. If your medical skills are excellent, you will receive an additional salary increase. The specific increase will be determined by your medical skills. Of course, if anyone is willing to participate in combat and achieves military merits, you will also be given corresponding rewards. Those willing to accept this employment, please remain where you are. Those unwilling to join my crew can leave now. Don't worry, I am a man of my word. If I say I'll let you go, I'll let you go, I won't ambush you halfway. After all, I am also human and may get sick in the future. Slaughtering doctors would not benefit me if I fall ill in the future. I've said my piece, please make your decision. As he finished speaking, the palace hall doors were opened by the pirates with a rumbling sound. There was no one blocking the exit, the doctors could leave whenever they wanted. However, even with the doors open, not a single doctor present left. Seeing this, York knew they still didn't trust him, so he added another sentence. These doors will remain open until sunset today. After dark, the doors will close. At that time, even if you are unwilling to join the ship, I will forcibly tie you to it. So, cherish this time to consider. With that, York turned and left, and most of the pirates present followed him. As soon as the pirates dispersed, the doctors, who had been silent for most of the day, finally began to chatter and discuss. A minimum monthly salary of 1 million berries. The treatment sounds pretty good. But it means becoming a pirate. From now on, we'll be wanted by the world government, living in constant fear. No matter what, I definitely can't treat pirates. York paid no attention to the doctor's arguments. After leaving the hall, he called Kaido and Dragon and headed directly to a small town called Kokoawat, which he had heard about these past few days. Is there anything special about this town? Kaido asked curiously. York replied, there's a doctor who is very likely the world's #1 in medical skills right now. At this, both Kaido and Dragon perked up. The world's #1 doctor. Really or fake? As the three chatted, York casually grabbed a passerby. An inconspicuous white light tendril touched the person's skin, and their eyes immediately became hazy. York took the opportunity to ask, excuse me, where does Dr. Kurhal live? The passerby, immersed in pleasure, pointed casually in a direction. Dr. Kurhal lives at the junction of the lake in the forest outside of town. If you follow this direction, you should be able to find her. Thank you. York thanked him softly, dissolving the holy light tendril and simultaneously withdrawing the ability he had placed on the passerby. The passerby immediately shivered, then instantly bent over, wanting very much to cover a certain area with both hands, but feeling too embarrassed to do so in public. So, he could only walk bent over, head down, pulling his winter hat as far down as possible, and hurried back home. As for York and his companions, following the passerby's directions, they successfully found the person York was looking for at the entrance of an independent building outside the small town. Hello, Dr. Kurha, I wonder if we could have a chat. Dr. Kurha was 104 years old this year. Her face was very old, but her figure was still very well maintained. The places that should be prominent still were, and the places that should be slender remained so. Furthermore, her attire was different from that of typical elderly people, wearing young, hot girl clothing. If one only looked at her back, they would never guess she was a 104-year-old. Dr. Kurha had just seen off a patient who had come for treatment. Seeing the appearance of York's trio, she, having experienced much in life, immediately caught a different aura. Pirates. Dr. Kurha said with a smile. It's no problem for me to treat you, but my fees are not cheap. York smiled faintly at her words. We're not here for treatment, but to invite you to join our pirate crew. Ha 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 ha. Dr. Kurha burst into laughter, looking up at the sky. Invite me. Little brats, do you know how old I am this year? 104 years old. Inviting an old woman like me, are you out of your mind? Hearing the numbers, 104 years old, Kaido and Dragon, who had initially been nonchalant, were both startled. They began to scrutinize Dr. Kurha up and down. This old woman, who looked no more than 60, was actually 104 years old. Dragon, in particular, specifically lingered his gaze on Dr. Kurha's chest and waist hips for an extra moment. To still have such a figure at 104 years old. He had to admit, he was starting to believe York's claim of her being the world's #1 doctor. Oh my, oh my. Dragon's scrutinizing gaze, of course, did not escape Dr. Kurha's notice. She immediately smiled and teased, "Young man, are you perhaps curious about my secret to eternal youth? Or do you want to spend an unforgettable night with this 104-year-old old woman?" Dr. Kurha's joke made Dragon blush, and he immediately spoke up to dissuade her, saying, "Please don't make such jokes." Ha ha ha, what an unhumorous kid. Dr. Kurha burst into laughter, leaving Dragon speechless. Soon, the laughter stopped, and Dr. Kurha switched back to a serious attitude to answer York's previous question. "Kid, I don't know why you'd want to invite an old woman like me onto your ship, but I'm already 104 years old this year. I lost the adventurous spirit you speak of a long time ago, so please, go back. But in my opinion, you don't look old at all right now. At least living another 30 or 40 years wouldn't be a problem. Are you really not going to reconsider? Go back, kid, don't make me refuse you a second time." Dr. Kurha's attitude was very firm. Seeing this, York no longer insisted and unhesitatingly turned and left with Kaido and Dragon. On the way back, Kaido couldn't help but complain. "That old woman is 104 years old. Even if she gets on the ship, we'd probably just have to take care of her. Even if her medical skills are the best in the world, they probably wouldn't be useful. York, I don't think you needed to make this trip at all." York smiled slightly at the words. "Then how about we make a bet? We'll bet that she'll still look the same 30 years from now." Kaido was stunned and became serious. "You're not kidding, are you? She's 104 years old. In another 30 years, she'll be 134. The grass on her grave would be several meters high by then." York smiled at Kaido, "Just tell me if you'll bet." Kaido hesitated. He felt that York must have confidence in saying this. So far, many things York had said had almost never been wrong. Since he was so firm in believing that this old woman could live at least another 30 years, then there must really be some secret about her. "So, I won't bet." The cunning Kaido directly refused the bet, grinning with a sly smile. "You're not on equal footing with my intelligence, I won't play such a foolish game with you." Tisk. York clicked his tongue. "Didn't trick you, huh? You're quite clever, kid. Whoa, that old woman really does have a secret." At this point, Kaido's curiosity was also piqued. "Speaking of which, what's that old woman's secret? Why can she live so long? It's my first time seeing someone live to 104. I don't know either." York shrugged. "But you don't need to worry about her lifespan. Because I know of something else that can extend life. If nothing goes wrong, that thing can extend our lives by at least 400 or 500 years. And it's 400 or 500 years in peak physical condition, it's just a bit troublesome to find." As soon as these words came out, Kaido and Dragon, who were originally just joking, both looked serious at the same time. "York, you're not kidding, are you? Is there really such a good thing? Ah, have you heard of pure gold? I know where to find pure gold." York didn't hide it and told them directly. Anyway, that anglerfish was indeed quite difficult to find. Without some luck and means, it really was like looking for a fish in the sea. Whoa, the legend of pure gold. Is that thing real? Kaido still didn't quite believe it. York continued to smile. "Don't underestimate legends. Many of those things are actually real, but they weren't written down. Through word of mouth, they were mistakenly thought of as myths. Before going to Sky Island, you should have all thought Sky Island didn't exist, right?" Kaido and Dragon's eyes narrowed again, then they put aside their doubts, and anticipation surged within them. If the legendary pure gold really exists and can be found, a lifespan of 400 or 500 years, perhaps my ideal world can really be achieved. Dragon thought to himself. While joking, York and the two others casually wandered around the island. Purely by chance, they wanted to try and see if they could stumble upon a devil fruit or something. The result, of course, was no harvest at all. By the time they returned to the palace, it was already dusk, about to enter night. York came to the hall where the doctors had been entertained earlier. After an afternoon of discussion and no supervision, more than half of the doctors here had left. Originally there were 411 people, but now York's glance showed less than 100. Good, quite a lot of people stayed. There's not much time left until dark. You all can consider a little more. After getting on the ship, the treatment will be excellent. If you stay here, you may not necessarily live the life you want. Time passed minute by minute, and York's persuasion did not have a particularly good effect. After all, for most ordinary people, the identity of a pirate still represented evil, instability, and an unsafe life. If it weren't for this, the East Blue's Goa Kingdom wouldn't have a place like the Grey Terminal. If those who couldn't survive could go out to sea and become pirates, and even live well, who would painstakingly stay put and be slaves to the nobles? Therefore, in the short time between dusk and night, dozens more doctors left. Finally, when it was completely dark and the palace gates were closed by the pirates, the doctors remaining were counted, and only 49 were left. York carefully counted the number and nodded in satisfaction. Good. A full 49 doctors are willing to join my ranks. This number is more than 1/10. It seems my conditions and my personal charm are still quite good. After saying that, York waved his hand, and Dragon immediately led Ivankov to compile the roster. At the same time, a large box of berries was brought out on the spot, and 1 million berries were distributed to each person. This is your settlement fee. You can choose to leave this money to your family on the island, or bring them with you onto the ship. Once this money is given, I will not take it back. You make your own decision. The day after tomorrow morning, we will officially set sail and leave this island. You have 1 day to deal with family matters. The 49 remaining doctors, holding the 1 million berries York distributed on the spot, silently clenched their fists. Such importance and preferential treatment, they had never received this in their previous normal work. 1 day passed quickly. The morning after next. Before the Red Flag pirates were about to set sail, 40 of the 49 doctors brought their families onto the ship. Of the remaining 9, 5 were bachelors, and 4 had been broken up with by their girlfriends. In short, all who could bring their families onto the ship did so. This made York even more satisfied with these 49 doctors who were willing to join his ranks. Lads, set sail. With an order, the Red Flag pirates, who had been docked at Drum Kingdom for nearly a week, finally set sail again. Wapol and the other royals and nobles, who had been detained by York, silently watched them depart into the distance. This week, they had indeed suffered greatly, and several noblewomen had even been forcibly taken away by the pirates on board, but in the end, they had survived. Just then, as the Red Flag pirates' ship was about to disappear from view, marine warships sailed over from the side. The leading rear admiral, with a righteous expression, shouted through a megaphone, "Where are the Red Flag pirates? Marine reinforcements have arrived. Surrender at once." Wapol and the other royals and nobles were collectively speechless at this scene, and their faces all darkened. But even so, after the Marines landed on the island, they still had to force smiles and say good things. What a bunch of useless Marines. Fire. Above the Azure Sea, the Red Flag pirates encountered another pirate crew, and a fierce naval battle erupted between them. Bring the ship closer. If we take out the Red Flag pirates, we'll be number 1 in the world. And we can have the world's most beautiful woman, Shaki. Charge, brothers. A pirate ship, about 70 meters long with over 300 crew members, braved the cannon fire from York's ship and drew near, eventually docking successfully. Ropes with grappling hooks were thrown over by the enemy, catching on the ship's rail, and one fearless pirate after another, brandishing swords and spears, rushed onto the Red Flag pirate cruise ship. Kill. Half an hour later. The pirates who had been so fearless and arrogant moments before were now meekly bound on the deck of the Red Flag. York stood on the 3-story balcony of the stern castle, looking down at the defeated and bound pirates below. I'm giving you 2 choices now. 1, surrender, or 2, die. Which do you choose? Surrender. We are willing to surrender. Join the Red Flag pirates. The battle ended. The Red Flag Pirates' original 1,500 new members and 49 ship doctors suffered about 50 new member casualties, while capturing and recruiting over 200 enemy pirates. With this gain and loss, the Red Flag Pirates, not counting core members like York and the medical team, now had a total crew of about 1,700 people. The calm voyage continued. After leaving Drum Kingdom, York had no interest in lingering in the first half of the Grand Line. After a brief resupply in Alabasta, he headed directly towards Sabayati Archipelago. More than 10 days later. Sabayati Archipelago. The massive red flag slowly approached this island, which resembled a fairy tale, with bubbles rising from the ground. York stood at the bow, giving orders to all the crew members on board. Lads, we've reached Sabayati Archipelago. Prepare to land and plunder. Remember, Islands 1 to 29 are within the range I permit you to plunder. Of course, if you're brave enough, Islands 60 to 69 are also yours for the taking. His words paused, and York waved his hand towards the front. All forces, attack. Au! 1,700 pirates shouted in unison. As the ship crashed into the island with a roar, the Red Flag Pirates, like a swarm of locusts, swarmed off the ship and began to sweep through and plunder Sabayati Archipelago. Sabayati Archipelago, which previously had lawless zones but had maintained restraint for years out of concern for the nearby Marineford, suddenly had its peace shattered. Who the hell are you fools? How dare you block my way? We are from the Red Flag Pirates. By order of the fallen master, Lord York. To plunder Sabayati Archipelago. If you know what's good for you, hand over all your valuables. Otherwise, when Lord York arrives, you'll all die. On Mangrove Island 18, a group of pirates who were walking normally were suddenly blocked by members of the Red Flag Pirates, and a verbal conflict erupted between the two sides. Red Flag Pirates. Fallen Master York. Is that the guy who recently became the world's highest bounty? Haha. We were just looking for him. And he delivered himself right to us. Brothers. Grab your weapons. Take out the Red Flag Pirates. Take out York. Today is the day we make a name for ourselves. Au! A major battle thus erupted in just a few words. And similar scenes were occurring on almost every island between Islands 1 and 29. The warring parties were mostly pirates, but there were also local gangs, human trafficking rings, and noble guards who had come to the area. Kaido led a small team, killing anyone who stood in his way, like a god of war, and arrived at Mangrove Area 1. Here was a world-renowned human auction house. They arrived just in time. A lively human auction was being held that day. Boom. The tightly closed door was violently smashed open by a thick spiked club, and the figure of a tall man appeared in the doorway. Waro. Still selling. Kaido strode into the auction house, his predatory gaze sweeping across the room. He completely ignored the slaves on the auction block, his attention fully focused on the nobles who had turned pale at his violent intrusion. You rude ruffian. A noble was about to open his mouth to curse, but an auction house staff member immediately intercepted him. Please calm down, esteemed guest. These invaders are enemies of our auction house. Please rest assured and leave them to us. The noble, who was about to curse, was appeased, and then the impeccably dressed staff member came to Kaido with an arrogant air. Where did this small fry pirate come from? Don't you know whose territory this is? How dare you break in here? I think you have a death wish. Seeing how arrogant this person was, Kaido suddenly felt playful. Oh ho! Whose territory is this? I really haven't heard. HMPH. The auction house staff member, seeing that Kaido was so ignorant, immediately became full of confidence, despite having been slightly nervous before. Listen well, you ignorant small fry pirate. This is an enterprise under Wang Ji, the pirate patriarch. You dare to trespass on Patriarch Wang Ji's territory. That means you are an enemy of Patriarch Wang Ji. You. Bang. Before he could finish speaking, Kaido's spiked club slammed down without warning. The auction house attendant, who had been so arrogant moments before, immediately became a pool of minced meat. Kaido extended his pinky finger and dug into his ear. What did you just say? This is Wang Ji's enterprise. Ha. Kaido blew a breath, sending the earwax on his pinky flying, then grinned a ferocious smile. Lads, smash this place to smithereens. Au! The pirates brought by Kaido responded loudly, each one filled with fiery enthusiasm. They didn't care about any pirate patriarch Wang Ji. Was his bounty as high as Lord York's? If not, then he was just a roadside nobody. After giving the order, Kaido led the charge, being the first to rush into the group of noble buyers who had not yet descended into chaos. His thick spiked club swept left and right, sending chairs and flesh flying. The frail nobles, accustomed to a life of luxury, couldn't even block Kaido's spiked club, let alone escape. Whirro whirro whirro. The pleasure of slaughtering nobles made Kaido burst into hearty laughter. This was what he had always wanted to do. To drag all those high and mighty nobles, who thought they were above the common folk, onto the battlefield for a fair fight. Come on. Come and fight. Aren't you nobles? Are you also afraid? Will you also die in the face of our anger from the bottom rung of society? Whirro whirro whirro. Under Kaido's lead, the other pirates also began a massacre of these nobles. For a time, the entire auction house was a splatter of liquids, red, white, and yellow, splashing onto the walls, the ceiling, everywhere. A large number of nobles who had been critically evaluating the slaves on the auction block could now only let out terrified and desperate screams. On the auction stage, the host, seeing how insane the red flag pirates were, was so scared he peed himself on the spot. He had seen people cause trouble in auction houses before. But this was the first time he had seen anyone openly slaughter nobles on such a large scale. In his fear, he instinctively wanted to seek help. So he dialed Wang Ji's Den Den Mushi, who was far away on Hashinosu Island. Purapurupuru. Click. Hello. Who is it? Wang Ji's voice came from the Den Den Mushi. Kaido, who was slaughtering nobles, paused his movements slightly, then a brighter smile appeared on his lips. It's me. Lord Patriarch. Oh, it's Dylan. You suddenly called the Den Den Mushi. Is someone causing trouble at the auction house? Yes. Lord Patriarch. Ho ho. This truly hasn't been seen in many years. Someone actually dares to cause trouble on my Wang Ji's territory. Wang Ji chuckled a few times on the other end of the Den Den Mushi, then spoke coldly. Tell me, who is the pirate causing trouble? I, Wang Ji, the pirate patriarch, will surely grant them a destructive end. Whirro whirro whirro. After occupying Hashinosu Island, you're starting to look like a leader, aren't you, Wang Ji? The host knelt on the ground, flustered. In front of him, Kaido had just snatched his Den Den Mushi and said those words. You are. Wang Ji on the other end of the Den Den Mushi seemed a bit slow to react. So familiar, I think I've heard your voice somewhere. HMPH. Although I can't remember for now, no matter who you are, to dare cause trouble in my Wang Ji's enterprise, I have to admit you have great courage. State your name. If you have the guts, come find me on Hashinosu Island. I will grant you destruction. Whirro whirro whirro. Kaido laughed again, and as Wang Ji wished, he told him his name. Alright, I'll tell you my name right now. My name is Kaido. You just stay on Hashinosu Island, patiently awaiting our visit. Click. The Den Den Mushi suddenly hung up, and Kaido, who hadn't finished speaking, froze on the spot. New World Sea, Hashinosu Island. Wang Ji, who had just forcibly hung up the Den Den Mushi, was covered in cold sweat. What did the guy on the Den Den Mushi just call himself? Wang Ji turned to ask his subordinates, hoping to hear a mistaken answer from them. Reporting, Lord Patriarch, the fool on the other end of the Den Den Mushi just called himself Kaido. I heard it too, he called himself Kaido, there shouldn't be any mistake. Gulp. Wang Ji swallowed, a bitter smile of disbelief on his face. No, I think you heard wrong. That person's self-proclaimed name definitely wasn't Kaido. Purapurupuru. However, before Wang Ji could continue to argue with his subordinates, the Den Den Mushi, which had just hung up, began to ring again. Wang Ji again swallowed with difficulty, his heart pounding, his hands trembling, as he answered this call. A young and gentle voice then spoke from the Den Den Mushi. Yo, Wang Ji, Shaki. Click. The Den Den Mushi was forcibly hung up once again. York stared blankly at the Den Den Mushi that had been instantly hung up. Does Wang Ji really need to be so afraid? Shaki, standing beside York, let out a cold laugh. When he secretly ambushed me in alliance with the world government back then, he was quite bold. Hearing this, York reached out and pulled Shaki into his embrace. Don't worry, I will definitely help you get revenge. No matter if Wang Ji stays on Hashinosu Island or hides anywhere else. I will definitely find him. Hearing her lover's words, Shaki embraced York in return and rested her head on his chest. I believe you. Around them, the auction house was in ruins, with various liquids and fragmented remains splattered everywhere. Crimson blood flowed in countless small streams down the auction house stairs, while York and Shaki stood on the auction stage, embracing tenderly. Kaido watched this scene and suddenly felt a little queasy. So, he decisively led his subordinates into the back of the auction house. First, to slaughter everyone from the auction house, and second, to rescue the enslaved people being held captive. These enslaved people might not be willing to join them, but given the opportunity, they might still be able to recruit some skilled individuals. After all, those who are captured and sold as enslaved people are not necessarily weak. For example, in the future, Rayleigh willingly sold himself, as did Thor, the god of thunder, in the Marvel movies. As long as certain methods are mastered, even some powerful pirate captains can easily become auction items. While Kaido was rampaging through the auction house, Dragon also led Ivankov, Ginny, Kuma, and another pirate crew to raid various human trafficking establishments on the Sabayati archipelago. Their main goal was to rescue people, and their secondary goal was to annihilate the human traffickers. Ivankov and Ginny, in particular, had no psychological burden whatsoever when killing human traffickers. Only Kuma still had a bit of a bleeding heart, thinking that a good lesson would suffice. Fortunately, Ivankov finished them off for him, not letting any human traffickers they encountered escape. The great chaos on the Sabayati archipelago was, of course, known to the Marine branch stationed there. But they were just like the Drum Kingdom in the past. The base vice admiral ordered all Marine soldiers to collectively form a defensive line at the edge of Mangrove Islands 1-29. As long as the pirates did not cross this defensive line, they were not to actively attack them. Although the Marine soldiers were slightly displeased, in the end, no one disobeyed the order. The chaos and fighting on Mangrove Islands 1-29 continued. The mere 1,700 members of the Red Flag Pirates were, after all, somewhat stretched thin against the numerous pirate crews across 29 islands. After their initial momentum was blocked by a certain pirate crew, the Red Flag Pirates' morale gradually began to wane. Except for the battlefields led by Kaido and Dragon, other battlefields began to gradually retreat. Soon, a blood-soaked pirate ran frantically to York. Captain York. Our advance has been obstructed. Who is the opponent? This year's supernova. Maga the Great Serpent. A supernova. York raised an eyebrow. Due to the anime in his previous life, he was very interested in the group known as the Pirate Supernovas. Pirates who, within a year, go from zero bounty to a bounty of over 100 million berries, are collectively known as supernovas. Such individuals, even without considering Luffy, Zoro, Law, Kid, Killer, Bege, or Bonnie, either part of the protagonist crew or allied with them. Just looking at Apu and Hawkins, who are enemies of the Straw Hat crew, their strength and growth potential are quite good. Now that he coincidentally encountered one, there was no reason to let him go. Take me to see him. Led by the messenger pirate, York quickly encountered the pirate supernova, Maga the Great Serpent, who had beaten many of his subordinates to a pulp. This was a very tall young man, similar in age to York, around 24 or 25. He was nearly 5 meters tall, with a well-proportioned physique and an unruly appearance, showing no other racial characteristics. He was a pure human. He was currently sitting like a king on a collapsed architectural pillar. Seeing York being led over by his subordinate, his eyes immediately flashed with a piercing gleam. You are fallen Master York. Magus scrutinized York from head to toe. He was as young as him, but not as tall, only about 2 meters. His body proportions were excellent, and his muscles were not obvious due to his clothes. Mainly, his face was much handsomer than his own. Although he found it very displeasing, Maga had to admit that the legendary Fallen Master was a great handsome man. It's just, he's too young. Maga let out a strange laugh. You, so young, about my age, have actually achieved the world's highest bounty. How can I possibly believe that? Faced with Maga's skepticism, York did not retort, merely picking up a common katana that had fallen to the ground. It's been a long time since I used swordsmanship. I've been using my fists all this time, almost forgetting that my swordsmanship is actually quite strong. Looking up at Maga, who was more than twice his height, York raised a hand and beckoned. Come on, if you can survive one move from me, I'll spare your life. If you can survive 3 moves from me, I'll let you leave this island. Huh. Maga let out a questioning sound of defiance and displeasure. What are you? You think I can't last 3 moves against you? Clang. A flash of sword light. York stood still, merely swinging his sword casually, and the rooftops of the buildings on both sides of the street were sliced open. The stone houses slid down along the diagonal cut, crashing to the ground with a roar. On Maga's chest, a gash that nearly reached the bone appeared, and crimson blood spurted out from it. Are you trying to say that was a sneak attack? York interrupted Maga's words preemptively. But I swung my blade openly in front of you. If you didn't react in time, am I to blame? Maga shut his mouth, his palm trembling slightly as he hovered it over the wound on his chest. It seems your strength is still decent. You didn't die from one of my cuts. As expected of a supernova, you have some substance. York said with a smile, but be careful with the next sword strike. Just now, I was merely testing to regain the feel of my swordsmanship. Now, I will seriously cut you with one strike. If you can't block it and die, don't blame me. Sliding, York gripped the hilt of his sword with one hand, and his aura changed accordingly. Maga's pupils instantly constricted at the sight, not daring to be arrogant any longer, and immediately activated his trump card. His already tall and robust body rapidly expanded, and his upper and lower halves elongated quickly. His mouth protruded forward, his eyes turned into vertical slits, and his body was covered in snake scales. Within a few short seconds, a giant python, 3 meters thick and over 40 meters long, appeared before York. The massive and slender snake body coiled around the tops of the buildings on both sides of the street, Maga's snake head looking down at York, his eyes filled with solemnity. I didn't expect you to actually be a snake fruit user. No wonder your epithet is Great Serpent. Watching Maga's transformation, York paused the second strike he was about to deliver. Looking at you, it seems you're not just a common animal type, but an ancient zone, right? Exactly. Maga replied with a hint of pride. Animal type, snake fruit, ancient zone, titanoboa form. This is my ability. Not bad. York praised him. Since you're an ancient zone, I won't kill you. Stay and be my subordinate. With that, York slowly raised the long sword in his hand. He didn't use armament hockey, nor any devil fruit ability, it was pure, fundamental swordsmanship. With a single downward slash, a massive flying slash flew out. The giant python, Maga's transformed body, immediately tried to dodge but couldn't. The slash directly left a huge wound on the giant python's chest. Blood gushed out, and the giant python let out a scream. Maga's enormous snake head first reared high, then crashed down heavily, its snake eyes rolling back as it instantly lost consciousness. Captain Maga. Maga's subordinates cried out in alarm, surrounding Maga and anxiously checking his injuries. Of course, some also roared in anger, brandishing their swords and charging at York. York had no interest in fighting these small fry anymore. He casually waved his hand and said to his subordinates, capture them all. The members of the Red Flag pirates who had arrived with him immediately responded excitedly. Before long, the members of the Great Serpent pirates were successively defeated, captured, and became prisoners of the Red Flag pirates. And with the defeat of the strongest Great Serpent pirates, the other battlefields that had been able to suppress the Red Flag pirates also successively received support from Kaido, Dragon, Shaki, and even Stussy. The strength of those 4 was simply something that the pirates of the Sabayati archipelago at this stage could not contend with. So, the great chaos on the Sabayati archipelago, after lasting for a full day, ultimately concluded with the victory of the Red Flag pirates. The Marines of Sabayati. They stood on the outer ring of Mangrove Islands 1 to 29, silently watching the inner islands gradually turn from lush green to rivers of blood. The Marine soldiers who had previously resented the Vice Admiral's order now felt lucky. Fortunately, they hadn't recklessly disobeyed, otherwise, they might have also become a corpse inside. Mangrove Island 27. This was where York and his crew docked their ships. After a day of massive brawling, the pirates successively returned with their spoils of victory. Huge piles of gold, silver, treasures, and berries cash were directly stacked on the island, forming a small mountain several meters high. Similarly, the number of pirate captives captured by the Red Flag pirates also exceeded 3,000. And besides these 3,000 people, and some other enslaved people who were intentionally released, on all islands from 1 to 29, all pirates and underworld figures engaged in illegal activities became nutrients for the mangroves. Correspondingly, the Red Flag pirates also experienced their first major reduction in numbers. Of the original 1,700 members, over 700 were killed in action, and over 300 suffered light or severe injuries. No one noticed during the battle, as they were dispersed across 29 islands. Even if these islands were small, their combined area was quite large. Now, after a careful count, everyone couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. So many died. Fortunately, York had previously recruited 49 doctors in the Drum Kingdom. Adding some ship doctors from the original 1,700 members, they collectively gathered 60 doctors. They provided ample and detailed treatment to the more than 300 light and severely injured survivors. This made the surviving pirates, though still wary, not feel that York was intentionally sending them to their deaths. They even, in turn, scorned the unfortunate ones who had died. Worthless trash with insufficient strength. They deserved to die. Keep 30% of these stolen treasures for me, the cadres get 20%, and all the rest of you split the remainder evenly. York waved his hand, directly distributing the mountain of treasures. Actually, when he was on Sky Island, he had established a complete set of laws. But with the pirate crew members being so diverse now, if he were to implement a strict reward and punishment system, it would likely backfire. So, he needed to use battle after battle to weed out the incompetent and keep the elite who were both strong and loyal. Once the pirate crew's numbers and strength were refined to a certain degree, and his personal prestige was established through continuous battles, reforming the pirate crew's reward and punishment system would proceed much more smoothly. Awoo. Thank you, Captain York. Captain York is so generous. Hearing York's treasure distribution mechanism, the pirates, who had just lost nearly half their numbers, immediately forgot their sorrow and cheered loudly. In this pirate world, pirate crews like the Straw Hats were extremely rare. The vast majority of pirate crews, wealth distribution mechanisms involve the captain taking the lion's share, usually 70% to 80%, the cadres taking a smaller portion, at least 10%, and only then would the remaining ordinary members get to split what was left. Now, York immediately gave half the treasure to the lower ranks, and their loyalty to York instantly surged. Listening to the pirates' cheers and flattery, York did not get carried away. He knew very well that loyalty bought with money could also be lost because of money in the future. To completely gain the unwavering loyalty of these pirates, in addition to the aforementioned culling of the weak, he needed to do more. So, after the pirates' cheers subsided slightly, York continued to explain the detailed rules for treasure distribution. Lightly wounded individuals in today's battle will receive an extra share of treasure. Seriously wounded individuals will receive 2 extra shares of treasure. As for those comrades who died in battle, they will receive 5 shares of treasure as a condolence payment. I will find a way to send this condolence payment to their families. For those without families, I will leave their treasure in their hometowns. Do any of you have objections to this distribution rule? York asked the pirates loudly, patiently waiting for someone to stand up and object. However, after hearing his words, the pirates all inexplicably burst into tears. Captain York. Boo-hoo-hoo. Captain York. You are our savior, Captain York. You are the first captain who treated us like humans, Captain York. Watching the large group of scruffy men weeping, York couldn't help but fall silent. What kind of boss did these pirates follow before? Never mind, although it was a bit different from what he had expected, a good outcome was all that mattered. Turning around, York walked over to the more than 3,000 captured pirates. In terms of overall combat power, these 3,000 people were definitely superior to the Red Flag pirates' previous 1,700. But Kaido and Dragon's combat power was simply unreasonable, so they could only become captives. I don't have much to say to you. Sweeping his gaze over the huddled captives, York said loudly. Surrender and join my pirate crew to live. Refuse to join my pirate crew, and die. You choose. I only have one night's patience. Give me your answer before we set sail tomorrow morning. With that, York left without looking back, leaving only a small number of pirates to guard them. At the same time, after confirming the treasure distribution mechanism, most of York's pirates began to spread out across Mangrove Islands 1 to 29. They went to search for the bodies of their fallen comrades. Later, they would be cremated and made into urns, to be sent back to their hometowns in the future. The night passed without incident. Almost an entire night, the Red Flag pirates were busy cremating and boxing their deceased comrades. This also made the originally boisterous members of the Red Flag pirates much quieter after daybreak. After breakfast, York once again came before the captives. While they were busy with cremations yesterday, many captives escaped under the cover of night. It wasn't that York couldn't stop them, but there was no need. He didn't lack these 10 or so people. And anyway, the names of those who ran away never appeared in the manga. Now, the total number of captives remaining was about 2,900. York instructed Scott, the squadron leader he had appointed earlier, to ask them in batches if anyone didn't want to live and wished to die. In the end, all 2,900 people were willing to join York's command and become members of the Red Flag Pirates. Very good. From today on, you are our new comrades. Untie them. At his command, Scott led dozens of pirates to untie the captives. On the other side, Ivankov, Ginny, and Kuma also led a group of people, bringing pots of fragrant breakfast to distribute food to the new members of the pirate crew. By the time all the miscellaneous tasks were done, it was almost noon. York waved his hand, and the pirates of the original Red Flag pirates, almost one for each urn of a fallen comrade, lined up to board the ship. The 2,900 newly joined pirates followed behind them. Hoist the sails. Set sail. Red sails and flags fluttered, and the massive hull of the Red Flag slowly departed the island. Kaido stood at the edge of the ship's rail, raising his hand to release a large amount of flame clouds, which coiled around the hull from below, slowly lifting the giant ship from the sea. Next stop, York planned to directly enter the New World. Fish Man Island or anything like that was too dangerous. It was completely different from Sky Island in terms of danger level. As a transmigrator without a system, York had no interest whatsoever in the underwater world until he had cultivated a fully trustworthy coding craftsman. The enormous pirate ship slowly ascended into the sky. Outside the battlefield, the Marines, who had served as surveillance cameras for a full 2 days, were finally able to set foot on Mangrove Islands 1 to 29. It's too tragic. Bodies were everywhere, blood had flowed for 2 days and hadn't dried, and everywhere were small pools of blood accumulated in craters. The entire area of Mangrove Islands 1 to 29, apart from the slaves who had been deliberately released earlier and the captives who had escaped under York's indulgence, had no living people left. The Marine Vice Admiral in charge of the Sabayati Archipelago branch couldn't help but feel a chill at this sight. A pirate crew with such vicious methods, to my knowledge, this seems to be the first. The former Rocks, though also brutal, his brutality was more the aftershocks of battle, or the environmental destruction caused by Whitebeard's abilities. He never deliberately killed all living people in a certain area. However, the current York, although he hadn't caused major geographical damage to the Sabayati Archipelago, the pirates and underworld figures of Mangrove Islands 1 to 29 were almost completely annihilated. Even the bubbles generated by the mangroves had turned blood red because of it. Truly terrifying. The Marine Vice Admiral sighed with emotion. Afterward, feeling a sense of empathy, he ordered, "Clean up the bodies. There are still ordinary residents on the archipelago, let's not cause a plague." The Marines' cleanup will not be discussed further. On York's side, as the pirate ship ascended higher and higher, lifted by Kaido's flame clouds, the pirates of the Red Flag pirates gradually began to experience oxygen deprivation and altitude sickness. Why? I can't breathe. Is this some kind of curse? So uncomfortable. So painful. Captain York, have mercy. Watching these useless pirates, some even misunderstanding that he was trying to murder them, York sighed speechlessly, then had no choice but to pick up the transponder snail. Calm down, everyone. This is normal high-altitude sickness. If you can't adapt, it's just because your physical fitness isn't strong enough. If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't need to go through all this trouble. The azure dragon flame clouds lifted the pirate ship. First, it ascended to 10,000 meters, then crossed the red line from the sky, and after entering the New World waters, it descended back to the sea surface. Ah, I'm finally alive again. So Captain York wasn't lying, we all recovered once we returned to the sea. It must be said that people in the pirate world have high physical fitness. The current 3,900 people of the Red Flag Pirates included both wounded and seriously wounded. Yet, after experiencing altitude sickness once, not a single person died. If this were York's compatriots from his previous life, at least the seriously wounded wouldn't have survived. Getting back to the point. After entering the New World waters, York was not in a hurry to go to Hashinosu Island to seek revenge on Wang Ji. Although Wang Ji was indeed quite hateful. But as the saying goes, death is not scary, the process of waiting for death is the most terrifying. Let Wang Ji suffer mental torment on Hashinosu Island for a while, there's no rush to deal with him slowly after the main business is taken care of. So, York found Kaido and asked him, Kaido, do you know how to get to Wano Kingdom? Kaido was startled and couldn't help but retort, aren't we going to Hashinosu Island? Wang Ji isn't urgent. I want to help you avenge your past grudge first. Kaido fell silent, clenching his fists tightly. For so many years, he hadn't thought about returning to Wano Kingdom to retaliate against the king and royal family who betrayed him. But on one hand, he knew rocks wouldn't help him. On the other hand, he had indeed been so busy that he almost forgot. He hadn't expected York to remember it for him. His nose tingled, but Kaido managed to hold back his tears. He silently returned to his room and pulled out an eternal pose from a cabinet. This is the eternal pose to Wano Kingdom. York took the compass, walked to the balcony of the poop deck, and held it high towards the pirates below. Lads, our destination is set. It's Wano Kingdom, known as the land of endless war. I'm going to take you to destroy this kingdom. To plunder this kingdom. On the deck, a large group of busy pirates, upon hearing this, collectively let out excited cheers. Destroy the kingdom. Plunder the kingdom. Long live Captain York. Fire. Bring the ship closer. The New World Sea was truly a gathering place for pirate heroes. In the first half of Paradise, York and his crew had only encountered a few pirate crews during their voyage. But here, since the day they entered the New World, they had encountered a pirate crew every single day. Most of them were unable to adapt to the extreme climate of the New World and were preparing to flee back to the first half. Only a small number were just passing by. And these passing pirates, without exception, initiated attacks upon seeing the red flag. Destroy the red flag pirates. Take down York. The title of world's strongest. And the world's most beautiful woman, Shaki. They're all ours. Boom. 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 An intense naval battle erupted, with cannon fire flying everywhere. With a large number of pirates joining the red flag's massive hull, the ship's cannons were finally no longer just decorations. They spewed dazzling tongues of fire, bombarding the sea around the enemy pirate crews. Of course, some cannonballs directly exploded on the opposing pirate crews. But pirates in the New World, having survived there, would not be afraid of conventional cannon fire. Even if cannonballs flew above their ships, they had ways to detonate them in midair. Thus, the two pirate crews quickly linked up, and a fierce boarding battle ensued. Kill. York stood high above, not participating in the battle himself, silently watching the fierce fighting between the two sides on the deck. The pirates of the New World were indeed stronger than those in Paradise. But apart from the officers, there wasn't an insurmountable gap in strength. And speaking of officers, how many pirates in the New World were qualified to challenge Kaido or Dragon? So the final outcome of this battle was still a victory for the Red Flag Pirates. The opposing pirate crews, including their captain, all chose to surrender to save their lives and joined the Red Flag Pirates. The subsequent days of sailing were almost all like this. A small skirmish every 3 days, a big battle every 5 days. The Red Flag Pirates, who were originally considered first-class fighters in the Paradise Sea, all complained endlessly. But despite their complaints, their combat effectiveness was indeed gradually honed through these battles. Of course, there were still heavy casualties, but they were masked by one victory after another and wave after wave of newly joined crew members. And through these battles, the name of the Red Flag Pirates gradually became known in the New World. Originally, after the fall of the Rocks Pirates, the pirates of the New World only knew that Wang Ji, Golden Lion, Whitebeard, and Charlotte Linlin had survived that catastrophe and carved out their own territories. They believed that York, Kaido, and other members of the Rocks Pirates, as well as Shaki, whom they all yearned for, had died at God Valley. For this, they had been disheartened for a long time. But now, the Red Flag Pirates appeared out of nowhere, and some people had personally witnessed Shaki's figure on their ship. Suddenly, the entire New World pirate community exploded. For Shaki, charge. One pirate crew after another, launched attacks against the Red Flag Pirates. The Red Flag Pirates, who had just adapted to the previous battle frequency, suddenly began to feel that their voyage was becoming difficult again. Is the New World really so dangerous? No wonder Captain York and his crew are on a completely different level than us. Fighting like this every day, everyone who survives is a monster. Fortunately, although the attacking pirate crews increased significantly because of Shaki, the combat power of Kaido, Dragon, Stussy, and others remained strong. In terms of officer-level combat, the Red Flag Pirates had never suffered a loss, until this day. A pirate crew with red sails, just like the Red Flag, appeared before the Red Flag Pirates. On the sail was a skull with a curly mustache, and below the skull emblem were the English letters GOLD Roger. Captain York. It's the Roger Pirates. Long-term victories had made the Red Flag Pirates lose some of their awe for the New World Pirates. However, the newly joined crew members were still well aware of Roger's reputation. Upon hearing this, they couldn't help but advise York, Captain York. The Roger Pirates are not to be trifled with, perhaps we should avoid them for now. Avoid them for now. York looked at the pirate who was advising him, his face full of surprise. You want me to avoid him? What a joke. My men. Bring the ship closer. Awoo. The newly recruited pirates in the New World had no reaction. But the Red Flag Pirates, whose numbers had been reduced to 2,000 after this period of fierce fighting, let out an impassioned roar. Battle. Bring the ship closer. Take down the Roger Pirates. Above the vast sea, two pirate crews with equally crimson sails sailed towards each other. York and Roger, with a tacit understanding, each stood on their respective bow. York. Roger was the first to shout. Shaki is on your ship, isn't she? I didn't expect the famous Roger to come looking for me specifically for a woman. York sneered. That's right. She's on my ship. Upon hearing this, Roger immediately became excited. My men. You all heard that, didn't you? Save Shaki. Defeat York. The crew of the Roger Pirates responded with a unified roar. Shaki-chan. We've come to save you. Before long, the two pirate crews collided head-on at sea. Both hulls were made of treasure tree atom, and neither suffered too much damage after the collision. Roger took the lead, ready to leap onto the Red Flag's towering deck. But someone was even faster than him. A nimble figure was seen leaping from the mast of the Oro Jackson, arriving on the deck behind York with just one jump. York didn't turn around, still looking down at Roger below. Yo! Rayleigh, long time no see. Rayleigh, who had jumped up first, didn't respond. He drew his sword and was about to charge at York. Thunder Bagua. A thick spiked club, wreathed in lightning, swept in from the side. Rayleigh, whose eyes were only on York, was immediately startled. He had to temporarily abandon York with his drawn longsword and instead parry Kaido's sneak attack. Bang! With a loud crash, both sides retreated simultaneously. Rayleigh hadn't used Conqueror's Haki coating, and Kaido hadn't activated his fruit transformation. Rayleigh retreated further than Kaido, but Kaido had the advantage of a sneak attack, so they were evenly matched. Waro Rororo. Rayleigh. You want to challenge our captain already? You didn't ask me first. Rayleigh's expression was solemn. From that one collision, he sensed Kaido's growth over this period and knew he probably couldn't defeat him in a short time. So he spoke in a deep voice. Where is Shaki? Shaki. Kaido's face showed a playful smile. He hadn't expected there to be a story between Rayleigh and Shaki. He turned to look at York, who didn't turn his head, and Kaido immediately understood that Rayleigh was just a simple clown. Waro Rororo. Kaido began to anticipate Rayleigh's reaction upon meeting Shaki, so he extended his thumb and pointed towards the poop deck. She's on the third floor over there, but whether you can see her is not something I can decide. Rayleigh took a deep breath and nodded slightly to Kaido. Thank you. With that, he turned, facing the massive pirate group of the Red Flag pirates. Don't stop him. Let him pass. York's voice came from the bow, and the pirates on deck immediately obediently cleared a path. Rayleigh tightened his grip on his sword. From York's reaction and Kaido's smile just now, he had somewhat guessed the possible aftermath. But he was truly unwilling without seeing Shaki with his own eyes. He really wanted to ask Shaki in person if that invitation from back then still counted. So Rayleigh took another deep breath and, with heavy steps, advanced step by step towards the poop deck. On the Oro Jackson, Roger, Jabba, and others perceived everything happening on the Red Flag through observation hockey. So they no longer waited. Led by Roger, they began to leap onto the Red Flag's deck one by one. York. Roger leapt high, grinning broadly. You made me suffer quite a bit back then. York also grinned. Weren't you happy? The former gripped his longsword, black and red conqueror's hockey lightning streaking, splitting the mountain with his might. Divine avoidance. The latter clenched his right fist, also with black and red conqueror's hockey lightning streaking, soaring into the sky from where he stood. Fist bone, crushing fist. Boom. Sword and fist collided in the air, erupting in a large amount of black and red lightning. Nearly half of the Red Flag pirates' crew couldn't withstand the clash of their hockey, immediately rolling their eyes and fainting on the ground. Conqueror's hockey. Maga, the supernova York had subdued at Sabayati Archipelago, stared blankly at the collision in front of him. Is this the captain's strength? Haha. Kaido. Your opponent is me. I wonder if you can take one of my axe swings. Jabba leapt up after Roger, and as soon as he arrived, his target was Kaido. Kaido's eyes narrowed. Not daring to be careless, he immediately activated his Azure Dragon Fruit Human Beast transformation. At the same time, black and red Conqueror's hockey lightning was clearly wrapped around his spiked club. Thunder Bagua. The greenish-purple lightning of the Azure Dragon and the black and red lightning of Conqueror's hockey intertwined, simultaneously wrapping around the spiked club. Under Kaido's swing, it collided in the air with Jabba's cleaving axe. Rumble. The sky gathered dark clouds because of Kaido's transformation, but when their two weapons collided in the air, the gathered dark clouds parted to the left and right. Visually, it was as if the sky itself had split due to their collision. The sky split open. Maga was once again dumbfounded. Is this the strength of an officer? The Roger pirates were still leaping up, and the next Red Flag pirates officer to step forward was Dragon, who had been on par with Kaido during this period. After the clash between Roger and York ended, Roger used the recoil force of hockey to do a backflip and land behind York. York did not intercept him in midair, instead, he used that time to activate his Devil Fruit Awakening. Dark flames, like streamers, emerged from behind York's head, and all his hair transformed into pure white flames. Roger turned around, and the first thing he saw was a York who looked like a god. Oh, is this your rumored Devil Fruit Awakening? Curiosity showed on Roger's face. I heard your Devil Fruit Awakening destroyed Water 7. Isn't your ability supposed to make people happy? Why did it change after awakening? Devil fruits are incredibly mysterious. York grinned. The abilities displayed before awakening are sometimes not consistent with the abilities after awakening. For example, Bonnie in the original story. Initially, her Devil Fruit ability was to change her own or others' ages, but then in the Egghead Island arc, she directly became a second Nika. Compared to Bonnie's Devil Fruit, York's ability change isn't even that outrageous. After all, when Bonnie transformed into Nika, she hadn't awakened her Devil Fruit. Haha. This is truly the first time I've heard such a thing. Roger gripped his long saber tightly, his eyes burning with intense fighting spirit. Speaking of which, is Tom from Water 7 alright? He's my friend. Don't worry, he and the citizens evacuated long before Garp and I started fighting. He even helped me build this ship. After answering Roger's question, York no longer hesitated. He raised his hand and beckoned towards Roger, and an invisible gravitational force instantly appeared. Roger stumbled, pulled by this sudden force, completely unprepared for York's ability to mutate so strangely. York seized Roger's momentary lapse. He clenched his right fist, concentrating all his power into it, and the fist's surface glowed with a scorching white flame, like the surface of the sun. This was a 6,000 degrees Celsius punch, further amplified by the double overlay of Ruo Haki and Conqueror's Haki. The scorching white flame surged like water over the surface of York's right fist, and as it flowed, black and red lightning generated within it. A sunny smile played on York's lips as he softly asked Roger, "Roger, do you know how hot the surface of the sun is?" "What?" "Fist bone. Solar impact." Having just been pulled off balance by York's gravitational pull and now being asked a question he didn't know the answer to, Roger almost lost his focus. Fortunately, he was, after all, a top-tier expert, once second only to rocks, and now having reached the same realm as rocks. He saw a red flash in his eyes, clearly perceiving the scene a few seconds later where York's punch would shatter his upper body. His face, which had held a playful expression, instantly tightened. Before York's punch landed, he swung his saber to block. Boom! Haki lightning erupted, followed by a scorching white beam of light that pushed Roger backward. Roger gripped the hilt of his saber with one hand and braced the back of the blade with the other, continuously releasing armament Haki to counter the beam of light. But in the end, he was still sent flying beyond the pirate cruise ship, triggering a massive explosion of light and heat in the high sky. York gazed at the small sun exploding in the sky, unable to help but feel regret. The sneak attack failed. Roger slowly fell from the sky, stepping on air to return to the deck of the Red Flag. However, he was in an extremely disheveled state. Almost all his clothes were destroyed in the light and heat explosion just now. Only his pants, from his waist to his thighs, remained intact, barely preserving Roger's dignity. Roger slowly straightened his body, raised a hand to wipe away the blood from the corner of his mouth, and stared at York with a serious gaze. "You really tried to kill me just now, didn't you?" "Of course." York had nothing to deny. "Instead, I should be asking you. Why shouldn't I kill you? Rocks, if no accident happened, was taken down by you and Garp working together, right? And Rayleigh." His demeanor clearly showed he wanted to make a move on my woman. "Shouldn't I be angry about that?" Roger remained silent. His thoughts before York threw that punch were still stuck on their encounter at Hashinosu Island. At that time, although he and Rayleigh had fought with York, the overall atmosphere was still harmonious. While they weren't exactly friends, they weren't enemies either. "Sorry." Roger apologized with a pained expression. "I overlooked the matter of God Valley." He didn't explain that rocks at God Valley was abnormal, nor did he bother to tell York the true aftermath of God Valley. Since York viewed him and Garp as the culprits who killed rocks, he naturally would only adopt the attitude appropriate for an enemy. The atmosphere between the two changed completely from this moment on. Intense killing intent began to surge in both their eyes. York, however, silently dispersed the light gathered on his fist. The reason was simple: the light form wasn't as effective as he had imagined. Because the beam of light that erupted from the punch he just threw at Roger left a charred, long mark directly on the ship's deck. And this was merely the effect of one strike. If he continued to use it, this ship, which he had spent a fortune building, would likely be destroyed by his own ability. So York chose to switch abilities. Anyway, his devil fruit had two modes, light and dark, from the moment it awakened. Switching from light awakening to dark awakening, his external form naturally underwent corresponding changes. The black flame cloud streamer originally wrapped around the back of his head gradually transformed into pure white. At the same time, his hair, which had been burning like white flames, also returned to its original state. At first glance, York's dark awakening had almost no changes except for the addition of a pure white flame streamer. However, Roger at this moment no longer dared to be careless in the slightest. Because York's punch just now had indeed put his life in danger, and now that York's ability had changed again, he dared not underestimate York's power anymore. "Roger, aren't you going to attack?" York smiled and beckoned to Roger, who returned a grin. "I'm waiting for you to finish transforming. That kind. Then I really must properly repay your kindness." Sacred white light emanated from York's entire body. His posture at this moment was almost identical to when Roger first saw York. Roger initially thought nothing of it, but he quickly noticed something unusual. This feeling. Armament Haki can't break through it. Under the illumination of the sacred white light, Roger's body reacted uncontrollably. Nervous, he quickly observed his surroundings, only to find that the other pirates were still fighting normally, with no abnormalities appearing. York's explanatory voice sounded at the opportune moment. Don't look, my awakening power only affects you. No one else is affected. Roger's face sank as he thought of a terrible outcome. Could it be that after your ability awakened, it changed from an area of effect to a single target, and in corresponding, the ability's effect increased exponentially? It truly is you. To be able to see through the essence of my ability at a glance. York grinned. So now, are you ready to accept this happiness? York's words confirmed Roger's guess, especially the instinctive reaction from his body, which made Roger clearly understand that York was absolutely not exaggerating. There's no other way. I originally didn't want to get to this point with you. Roger let out a soft sigh. He had genuinely believed he could become friends with York. Even if York had most likely already stolen the heart of his beloved woman, Shaki. But among pirates, making friends wouldn't necessarily lead to an endless feud over such a matter. However, now that York was determined to kill him, he naturally couldn't face York with his previous attitude. York, since you now crave war, then I shall grant you war. Roger let out a low roar, and the next second, immense haki erupted from his body. Black and red lightning swept across the deck, and many pirates who were fighting instantly fainted. Streaks of lightning emanated from Roger's entire body. York gazed intently, seeing that this scoundrel had actually wrapped Conqueror's haki around his entire body, just like armament haki. It must be said that although this move was reckless, it perfectly isolated York's exponentially enhanced ability after awakening. The final battle at God Valley. It allowed me to master this unique technique. York. Now I'll tell you, Devil Fruit Awakening doesn't mean everything. As long as haki is strong enough. No Devil Fruit ability will work on me. With that, Roger appeared before York as if teleporting, thrusting his saber. Aragami. Black and red Conqueror's haki lightning coiled around the blade, stabbing towards York's waist and abdomen at an incredibly fast speed. Although York's observation haki saw it, his body in this awakened mode couldn't quite keep up, so he simply didn't bother to dodge. He wrapped Conqueror's haki around his right fist, adding Ruo haki and his Devil Fruit Awakening power, and punched towards Roger's chest. There was a height difference between the two, and Roger also had a weapon. So, it wasn't until Roger's long saber completely pierced York's abdomen that York's fist heavily struck Roger's chest. Boom. Haki lightning exploded, and both men were sent flying backward simultaneously. Roger slid across the deck of the Red Flag, landing on his backside, and finally crashed hard into the ship's mast, leaving a large human-shaped dent. York, on the other hand, fell directly from the bow of the ship, smashing into the deck of the Oro Jackson, also leaving a large human-shaped dent. Roger's saber is weaker. York reached out to press his bleeding abdomen, then leapt back onto his ship. He then activated Holy Light Absorption, releasing countless Holy Light tentacles to entangle the pirates who couldn't even withstand Conqueror's haki. After drawing a trace of life force from them, the wound on his abdomen began to heal rapidly. Just as York was healing his wound, Roger on the opposite ship also got back up. The two looked at each other from dozens of meters away, and York spoke first. You talked a big game, but after wrapping Conqueror's haki around your entire body, the haki you can use for offense isn't as strong as before. At least I nullified your Devil Fruit Awakening. Roger grinned. Next, let's see which of us kills the other first. York's gaze swept over the countless pirates on the ship, returning a smile. In a battle of attrition, I don't think you have a chance of winning. Roger. Who knows without trying? Your Devil Fruit Awakening can't possibly be maintained indefinitely. York. Your full-body Conqueror's haki doesn't necessarily last long either. After their war of words, both fell silent, then simultaneously charged towards each other. Die. While York and Roger were locked in a fierce battle. Rayleigh, meanwhile, had very smoothly reached the third floor of the stern castle. Through his observation haki, he easily located Shaki's position. However, standing outside the door, he felt a sense of hesitation. He deliberated for a long time but still didn't raise his hand to knock on the door. Of course, he was Roger's first mate after all. Even with some hesitation, he couldn't truly remain indecisive forever. Finally, Rayleigh took the initiative to knock on the door. Knock knock knock. Come in. Creak, the sound of the wooden door opening. The first thing that caught his eye was a clean and tidy room, but the furnishings inside didn't look like a bedroom, instead, it resembled a captain's cabin. Shaki stood beside an office desk inside, looking at him with a complex expression. Rayleigh's expression was equally complex. He asked with a trembling voice, Shaki. Is the invitation from back then, still valid? As he spoke, he silently pulled out the small note Shaki had once given him from his own arms. The words, "Come pick me up, Shaki," were still perfectly clear on it. Evidently, Rayleigh had carefully preserved this small note throughout the past year. Listening to Rayleigh's words and looking at the small note he held, Shaki couldn't help but feel a pang in her nose, and tears threatened to gush out. Ray-san. Shaki took a deep breath, fighting back tears, a clear nasal sound in her voice. I'm sorry, but now, you and I are no longer possible. Upon hearing this, Rayleigh, unwilling to give up, continued to ask, did York force you? Shaki gently shook her head. Ray-san, I'm very grateful for your affection and feelings for me, but I am now York's woman, and I will not betray him. One of Rayleigh's fists clenched instantly, but his other hand, holding the note, remained perfectly steady. I see. Rayleigh didn't become hysterical, he even offered a relieved smile. Since that's the case, I have no more worries. I wish you and York much happiness. With that, Rayleigh turned and left without looking back. However, once he was out of Shaki's sight, his expression instantly became incredibly grim. As a man, no matter how magnanimous, having his beloved woman stolen would still make him angry. Rayleigh's ability to remain composed in front of Shaki did not mean he had no anger within him. He casually crumpled the small note he had carefully preserved until then, crushing it into a wrinkled mess in his palm. Rayleigh then, as if unintentionally, loosened his grip, letting it float gently down. Instead, the hand that had released the note tightened its grip on the saber hilt at his waist. Let me vent my emotions, Red Flag Pirates. The battle between the Red Flag Pirates and the Roger Pirates lasted an entire afternoon, and York also engaged Roger in a one-on-one death match for the whole afternoon. Roger stood in front of York, panting heavily. Using full-body hockey coating was still a bit too much of a burden for him. After all, he wasn't a zone-type devil fruit user, and his physical capabilities hadn't reached the absurd level of Kaido, the strongest creature, in later years. However, York, standing opposite Roger, wasn't in much better shape. Devil Fruit Awakening consumed no less stamina than full-body hockey coating. Furthermore, York's Devil Fruit had only recently transformed from a Paramesha to a zone type, so its physical enhancement was still developing and couldn't provide much help. Although York still possessed the ability to absorb others' life force to recover, Roger wouldn't just stand by and watch him recover. Even if he couldn't prevent it entirely, he could at least interrupt it. Thus, after an afternoon of fighting, the two of them were evenly matched, neither possessing the ability to kill the other in a short amount of time. York's other awakened mode might have been able to do it, but the current battlefield was on his ship. Aside from the issue of ship damage, he also had to consider the casualties among his crew. Coincidentally, the battle between Kaido and Jabba was also quite similar. Currently, Kaido still had a significant gap compared to Jabba, who was in his prime. But relying on the Azure Dragon Fruit's incredibly high HP, defense, and self-healing abilities, Jabba couldn't do much to Kaido in the short term either. In these two high-level battlefields, both pirate crews were roughly evenly matched. And apart from these two high-level battlefields, on other fronts, both sides also fought to a stalemate. Of course, this didn't mean that the true combat strength of both pirate crews was equal. Although the Red Flag Pirates had many people, with nearly 5,000 members on one ship. But to be frank, among these 5,000 people, the high-end combat power basically consisted only of York and Kaido. The remaining Dragon, Stussy, Shaki, Ivankov, Kuma, Ginny, and the newly recruited Supernova Maga, were all one or even several tiers lower in strength. In contrast, the Roger Pirates' strength was already nearing its peak. Except for a few members like Shanks, Buggy, Bullet, Crocus, and Kazuki Odin, almost all other named crew members were present. If the Roger Pirates were truly to fight to the death, Probably only the Red Flag Pirates executives and interns would survive by relying on Guinea's barrier fruit, while everyone else would die. The reason both sides fought to a draw now could entirely be attributed to the Roger Pirates' deliberate actions. One reason was that the Roger Pirates' style was simply like this. When facing pirate crews with whom they had some camaraderie, they generally wouldn't fight to the death, unless Roger gave the command. The other reason was Shaki. Although Shaki was now a married woman, the charm of a young married woman was actually far more deadly than that of a young girl. Even if they all knew they had no chance of winning her affection, they still couldn't help but be infatuated with her, willing to be knocked out by her fragrant kick. And then there was Rayleigh. After killing some Red Flag pirates to vent his anger, he proactively cooperated with Dragon and fought him to a draw. Otherwise, an unrestrained Rayleigh alone could have wiped out the several thousand members of the Red Flag pirates. Roger glanced back at the battle on the deck with the corner of his eye, and panting, said to York, "Let's call it a day, what do you say? It's getting dark, and it's dangerous for the ship to keep drifting at sea without dropping anchor." York let out a soft snort, feeling a little displeased. But he also knew that the current Red Flag pirates were no match for the Roger pirates. Even if he had a good chance of killing Roger in the end, if all his crew members died, it would still be a net loss. So York accepted Roger's suggestion. All right, let's leave it at that for now. The true victory or defeat will be decided later. Thus, under the command of both captains, the battle on the Red Flag ship gradually ceased. Both sides tended to their wounded and arranged for ship doctors to treat them. And after some statistics, it turned out that apart from those killed by Rayleigh, not a single person from either pirate crew had died. Leaving aside the Roger pirates, who were an elite crew with few members but formidable combat power. The fact that no one died on the Red Flag pirates' side was purely because the Roger pirates deliberately held back from delivering killing blows. Because of this, York and the entire high command of the Red Flag pirates keenly felt the disparity in strength between the two pirate crews. Let shame fuel our courage. One day, we will make others grateful that they and their companions were not killed by us. Night fell. The Red Flag ship and the Oro Jackson docked together on a nearby uninhabited island. And as expected, both pirate crews held a lively banquet on the island. York, with Shaki on his left arm and Stussy on his right, drew countless envious, jealous, and hateful gazes. Especially from Roger and Rayleigh. The former gnashed his teeth in hatred, constantly grinding on bone and meat, crunching and swallowing even the bones whole. The latter, meanwhile, sighed repeatedly and drank his wine in silence. It was all because he was a step too late during God Valley. Sometimes being one step late means being late for a lifetime. York looked at their glum faces, and his own depressed mood, which had arisen from his pirate crew being inferior to the other, instantly vanished. So what if my subordinates are not as strong as yours? I am the true winner in life. And the strength of subordinates can be caught up, but if you miss the woman you love, you truly miss her for a lifetime. The night passed without incident. The next morning, York woke up in the mirror world with Shaki in his arms, and Roger and Rayleigh's glum faces inexplicably reappeared in his mind. So he rolled over and once again pressed down on Shaki, who was still in a daze. It was 8 a.m. For York, who didn't have a habit of sleeping in, this was actually a bit late. So when he reappeared before Roger, Rayleigh, and the others with Shaki in his arms, their faces immediately darkened once again. Clearly, as old pirates, they had figured out the reason for York and Shaki's late rising. And that reason was so heartbreaking to them. To avoid further torment, and also to keep out of sight, out of mind, Roger and his crew proposed their departure. York, of course, had no intention of keeping them. Thus, the two pirate crews met briefly at sea, quickly had a skirmish, then quickly held a banquet, and finally quickly parted ways. It was as if the Roger pirates had just been bored and deliberately made the trip. And after the Roger pirates sailed away, the Red Flag pirates also set sail again. After briefly checking on yesterday's wounded, York once again traversed countless distances through Stussy's mirror world, appearing back on the Mads research ship, which was still in the first half of the Grand Line. Finding Vegapunk, York got straight to the point. Can you make me a light bulb that emits golden light? Or enhance the light I emit into golden light, that would also work. Making light bulbs. Why would you think of making that? Vegapunk was very confused by York's request, but York just smiled and explained, I'm going to use it for fishing. Fishing. Vegapunk became even more confused. As a scientist, he naturally knew that some fish were phototactic, and using light at night could indeed attract fish, but York wouldn't have made a special trip through the mirror world just for such a small matter, would he? Of course, despite his confusion, Vegapunk still made a giant lampshade for York as requested. Yes, not a light bulb, but a lampshade. This shade could transform the light emitted by York into dazzling golden light, which would also meet York's requirements. In comparison, making a light bulb would also require solving the power supply problem, which would be much more troublesome. York, having obtained the large lampshade, returned to the Red Flag ship through the mirror world. He installed this lampshade at the dragon's mouth, making the entire bow of the ship resemble a divine dragon spitting a pearl. Stussy and Kaido didn't understand what York was doing by suddenly bringing this thing. Especially at night, York would no longer be intimate with Stussy and the others, but instead sit cross-legged inside the lampshade, activating his devil fruit awakening and emitting dazzling light. This meant that the entire pirate ship was enveloped in golden light throughout the night, with almost no difference from daytime. Several days passed like this, and just as everyone was getting used to living without distinguishing between day and night, another golden light source appeared beneath the golden lit sea. The pirate on lookout on the pirate ship didn't notice at first, until the sea level ahead suddenly bulged, and a golden sun seemed to rise from the sea, only then did he finally sound the alarm. Splash. A huge splashing sound and the ship's alarm went off simultaneously. When Kaido, Stussy, and the others emerged from the cabin, they saw a golden sun hanging in the sky ahead. Is this York? No. That's not right. This is a Sea King's anglerfish. The giant golden sun illuminated the night sky, and simultaneously illuminated the huge body located beneath the golden sun. In front of this colossal body, even though the Red Flag ship was a super dreadnought with a length of 360 meters and a width of 150 meters, it still appeared to be the size of a child's toy. Buzz. With a buzzing roar, the Sea King's anglerfish opened its enormous mouth. Countless seawater was sucked into its mouth, and the Red Flag ship was constantly drawn closer to its maw by the current. Quick! Stop this, Sea Kings! We're going to be eaten! Kaido! Use your Boro breath! Shouts rose one after another, and most of the pirates panicked. Even the well-traveled Stussy couldn't help but feel a little nervous and quickly called out to Kaido. However, at this moment, York, who had been acting strangely for several days, suddenly appeared before everyone and shouted an order. Everyone! Do not resist. Our goal is to enter the belly of this Sea Kings. Nani? Kaido, who had already transformed and was about to unleash his dragon's breath, froze on the spot. York, you're not joking, are you? Of course not. York gazed at Kaido. Do you remember the longevity legend I once told you about? Longevity legend. Kaido was puzzled. He didn't recall York ever mentioning a legend related to longevity. No, there was one legend related to lifespan. Kaido instinctively wanted to open his mouth, but he saw York put a finger to his lips, and the words he was about to say immediately retracted. However, although the words were retracted, his heart began to pound violently. Pure gold. The pure gold rumored to grant immortality. Could it be that it's in the belly of this Sea Kings? Seeing Kaido's expression suddenly change dramatically, Stussy, Shaki, and others who were a beat slower finally reacted. Immediately, they all widened their eyes and stared intently at York. That legend, is it true? Of course it's true. York smiled and put his arm around Stussy's waist. You've always been bothered by the age gap between us, afraid that in a few years you'd be old and unattractive, and I'd no longer be interested in you. Now, you don't need to worry anymore. Because I successfully found a way for you to stay eternally youthful. Upon hearing this, Stussy's eyes immediately reddened. Actually, she had never mentioned her worries about age to York, only complained about it privately to Gloriosa. She truly hadn't expected that York already knew about something she had never spoken of, and had even found a solution for it. Stussy wanted to express the excitement and happiness in her heart at this moment, but the words caught in her throat, unable to form a complete sentence. York smiled and leaned down to gently kiss her forehead. Next time, I want to see you in leopard print stockings. Stussy broke into a tearful smile and emphatically agreed, okay. Under York's command and the Sea King's anglerfish's active swallowing, the red flag ship successfully entered its esophagus and, following the current, sailed all the way to the Sea King's anglerfish's stomach. Upon reaching here, the pitch-black world everyone had imagined did not appear. Instead, there was brightness everywhere. A light source from an unknown place illuminated the world within the stomach brightly. Not only that, but they also discovered an island with lush green trees inside the stomach. This is an island. Are you kidding me? There's an island inside a Sea King's. Just how big is this Sea King's? It can even eat an island. Hey, look. There are even dinosaurs on the island. This isn't a joke, is it? The red flag pirates exclaimed in surprise because of the island. York walked to the ship's rail, looking at the gradually changing color of the seawater below, and said to Kaido, Kaido, use your flame clouds to lift the ship. Any further and it's the stomach acid sea. Although ships built from treasure tree atom are corrosion resistant, they will still be damaged over time. Kaido nodded slightly upon hearing this, then activated his ability to release flame clouds, gently lifting the ship out of the water. Seeing this, Ru also activated his ability to create a small gust of wind, making the ship arrive above the island faster. York ordered the astonished pirates, bring all living creatures on this island to me. Remember, capture them alive. If anyone kills them, I'll kill you. The pirates collectively shivered, then collectively stood at attention and responded. Yes, Captain York. Thanks for watching.